She is a writer, a teacher, an author. So you can be an author and you can be a writer and an author, and a dating coach, a relationship coach. And her newest book, Miles of Trees, is about a woman who has had relationships with men and now having a relationship with a woman. Our guest tonight, Anastacia Elizabeth Walden in Gainesville, Florida. Anastacia, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for Pamela for having me. It's a pleasure.
Tell me, Miles of Trees is your latest book. You've also written a book about Gainesville, about being a tourist in Gainesville. But your book that is so intriguing to so many people, this whole topic of a woman who's had relationships with men and then shifts to relationships with women. Where does that story come from?
Comes from my own life. We write the best fiction when it's based on our life, don't we?
We do. And my dog just came in here. I don't, okay, sweetie. Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
What was the question again? Yes, it's based on my life, based on my story of dating men most of my life until late 30s, and then falling in love with a woman.
How does that happen? Because yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Anyone fall in love with anyone? It's this magical process, and I mean, through my work as a dating and relationship coach, this is part of my work with single people all the time. We can't guarantee there's going to be chemistry when there's a date. People can look really good on paper, but when two people feel really comfortable with each other, things click, and there's this chemical reaction. Who was I to deny that? I was taken back by it. I was fascinated by it. I felt like I woke up. And it's not that I hadn't thought about it. I'd been an avid reader of Virginia Woolf in my early 20s, being a love of, writers. She was a writer, and she was also having affairs with women. And in that time, I was just so fascinated by that story, and then the L Word came out in my 20s and, devoured that show and was really fascinated by it. But I had never been enamored with a woman before. I had never fallen for a woman. So I had only thought about it and I didn't really know if that was something that would feel comfortable and right for me until this one woman, just all of a sudden I had those feelings that I had had for men prior to that.
So did you embrace that right away?
I did.
And what was that? What was your thought process of how do I tell whether it's your parents or your coworkers, or were you actually dating a man at the time that you fell in love with a woman?
No, I was single at the time.
Okay.
And I feel like I didn't really come out at all. I just started dating her and then other women, and my friends would see me around town with a woman, and everyone pretty much just accepted it. A few people asked questions and asked the whys, and I love to talk about it. But most of my friends were pretty open about everything and authentic and curious, and just accepted that that's who I was enjoying spending my time with. So it wasn't really an issue. And I love coming out to my parents. I waited for a while before I did that just because I wanted to, I don't know, be prepared, I guess. But within the first year of dating women, I came out to them and they took it really well. I didn't have any horror stories of them treating me awful or throwing me out of the family. I mean, I think that's one of the benefits of coming out later in life. I had already proven myself that I do whatever I want, and I've lived a good life and made responsible decisions. So they accepted it pretty easily. I'm very lucky that way.
And then did you have any other siblings?
Mm-hmm.
Did you tell them first or you told your parents first?
No, my parents first. I wanted to go that route. My siblings just figured it out.
Your siblings already knew?
No, they just figured it out later.
You didn't have to tell them?
No.
So do you find that this community in Gainesville is more welcoming or more open than you perhaps would have found someplace else?
Yes, absolutely. And the community that I was in with my past work, as a midwife, I was already with more of an alternative crowd, I guess, and people who were doing things against the grain, away from the grain, I guess. So it didn't feel awkward at all.
So in the book,
Mhm.
so you wrote the book, the tourist book, and you have written other things. What made you decide to write about this journey of a woman who has dated men
Mhm.
and transitions to dating women? What made you think it's time for me to write this story?
Shortly after that relationship ended, I realized that there was so much bubbling within me, so many discoveries that I had made during that relationship that I felt like I had to write the book. I didn't know if I would want to get it published or not. The only way I could write it truthfully with a lot of my heart and my story in it was to assume that I was going to have a pen name or be anonymous. So I assumed that through most of the book, and it wasn't until the very end that I felt empowered to let it come out with my name. I didn't want to hide it anymore, but I think there's some protection that I was doing in the beginning of or close friends read something
Yeah.
that has sex scenes and intimacy and things that just seemed hard to imagine out into the world, you know? But
So
I
you
needed to tell that story. It was part of my healing, part of my growth and transformation.
so you had a relationship with a woman that ended. Did you find that that transition from a breakup with a woman was different than a breakup with a man, or were your emotions the same?
It felt like it was the first person I had ever dated and the first breakup and the first heartbreak I had ever had. It was humongous. It was life altering. It crushed me for a good year. I mean, off and on, I'd be in and out of it, but I didn't really feel like I was over it for a long time.
Why do you think that was?
I think I connected with a woman in such a deeper way than I'd ever connected with men before. I'd loved men, was attracted to men, felt like I had really good long-term relationships with at least 3 or 4 different men in my life
Hmm.
that were really long term. But it wasn't until I was relating with a woman and all of our similarities and being able to talk openly and letting my guard down. I didn't feel as judged from a woman as I had felt from a man. I wasn't even conscious of it then. But the things that we do as women sometimes to be attractive for men or to talk less or to whatever it is, I didn't feel like I had to do that with a woman. I felt like I was completely myself for the first time. And it was devastating to have that end.
So when that ended, did you think maybe this is not for me?
Not at all. I knew absolutely, I was absolutely sure I would never date a man again, that I was supposed to be dating women, and that was the issue with some of my past
Really?
relationships. Mhm.
Anastasia Walden is one of the authors that will be a part of the Sunshine State Book Festival, and we're talking about her book, Miles of Trees.
Mhm.
Where did that name come from?
Well, it's kind of cool to read a book and not know where the title comes from until you discover it in the book, so I'm not gonna answer that question. I'm an open book.
Wow, you're an open book till that question right there.
Because I love that when I'm reading a story and I'm like, "What is this title? I don't understand it." And then at some point it reveals itself and it's like finding, the golden egg or, some really rare treat. So I'll leave that.
So you are in your relationship, your dating and relationship coach. How did how did that factor in your discovery of you and what you wanted to do as far as your relationships were concerned?
Well, it's given me a lot of insights into dating and other people and why they are having struggles, especially with dating apps and people portraying themselves one way, wanting someone compatible, but not showing who they are. And I feel like you're not really going to attract someone who's compatible with you if you're not showing your authentic self to those people. And so the more people pretend, the more they're going to be matched up or be dating somebody that's not a good fit for them. And that's been really mind-blowing over the last few years since that relationship ended, to see how that works with other people.
So, Anastasia, there are a lot of people who wrestle with their decisions about sexuality, whether it is with same sex or opposite sex,
Mhm.
based on their religious beliefs. How did you manage through that, and your thoughts on you and your spirituality? Or did that factor in?
It didn't factor in at all. I went to church when I was young, and I stopped when I graduated from high school. And since then, I've considered myself more of a spiritual person. I'm really into personal growth and reading nonfiction ways to better ourselves, to be a better communicator, to get to know ourselves better. I'm really into yoga, meditation, even though I don't meditate very often. I yoga every day, though, and doing creative pursuits and just being a good person. So there was no doctrine that was telling me this was wrong and that there was any issue with it.
And do you feel like, as you have made this transition, how has it impacted you spiritually and emotionally?
Mm. I really believe it's added to my growth, being able to take all of those guards down. And part of that is being a woman in my 40s too, which I see with a lot of my clients, is that they're becoming more authentic. They're saying no, they're speaking their mind more. Part it took off. My personal growth journey really took off in a deeper way through that relationship. But it wasn't just the relationship. Something else really pivotal happened to me at that time in my life, and that's her. As you know, we have hurricanes around here, and two trees crushed my house when I was in it during that relationship, and that really broke me down and opened me up in a really profound way. It was a really, really hard experience, and that story is woven into this story of love and passion. There's also something really horrific that happened that the main character has to go through.
When you decided to write this book, and it is part of your, kind of like a memoir of sorts.
It's fiction, but based on some events that really happened in my life. Yes.
Did you have a discussion with the woman that you had the relationship? Was it her first relationship with a
No,
woman? Okay.
no. She was tried and true.
In your coaching, in your dating
Mhm.
coaching, how do you come across many people who are wrestling with that?
I wouldn't say many people, but occasionally, maybe of the female clients that I have, maybe 10% have stated things saying that they might be open to that. Maybe they've thought about it. Maybe they want to try it. Or, they come to me wanting help with relationships that they're having with men and women at
Yeah.
the same time. So
With this book that is geared toward the LGBTQ community, what is that market like for these kinds of works?
well, I first just want to touch on that for a minute because I ran into somebody that I know recently, and she told me she read my whole book and finished it. And because she's a straight woman, I said, "Oh, really?" She goes, "Yeah, I loved it. It was amazing." And I realized that my questioning of her finishing the book was that she's a straight woman and thinking this is just, a book to market to those in the LGBTQ community. But how many gay people have watched straight movies and straight TV shows and read straight books forever? And so I really feel like it's a book for everybody. It's about relationships. It's about communicating. It's about long distance relationships. It's about healing from trauma. It's about finding your true voice and speaking your mind. And I don't remember what your question was, but I think it's for everybody, really.
Yeah, yeah. I often think that about movies or books that are written by Black people about Black people, that they're white people who don't necessarily go see it. It's like, well, Black people go see white movies all the time.
All the time.
Be-
Yeah.
because the story is the story.
Yes. Yes.
The relationship is the relationship.
Hmm.
And lessons learned are the lessons learned.
Absolutely. But with that said, it can give people insights into those who are dating in a, heterosexual relationship versus switching to the other side, to the other team. It can give them some insight on how that can happen and how it's so natural and it's so similar to any other type of relationship.
What about people who have dated same sex and then decide they want to date the opposite sex? Do you run into that much?
Not as often, but yes, I have run into that before. And I think, we're attracted to who we're attracted to. And we also, sometimes we have ideas about who we want to date and we want to try out this other gender because we just haven't done it before. So there's sometimes curiosity, and there's sometimes people just know from the very beginning of their dating history who they are and who they want to date. Most people don't have a coming out as a straight person story. We don't ask that question of people.
Right.
And I think that's part of why I didn't want to come out and start telling everyone my story, because straight people don't have to do that. So I'll just date whoever I want, and you can catch up, as you notice that.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. I mean, there's no coming out for straight people, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, what does that say, though? What does that say in the same gender kind of relationships, that there's a need for you to make an announcement, but there's not a need for me to make an announcement?
Yeah, what is that? I blame the patriarchy. I blame religion. Doing what we've seen happen most of the time, what's been represented on TV and media. And as we know, that's been really changing a lot over the last 4 to 5 years, but that wasn't always the case. It wasn't always safe to come out or to question yourself because of all the stigma and the things that you could lose in your life, depending on what household you were raised in.
We are talking to Anastacia Walden, who is one of the 150 authors who will be a part of the Sunshine State Book Festival. She writes very empowering stories about women to empower women. And in this fiction novel, she follows lesbian characters that have a relationship. But what is it like for a straight woman to start dating women? And that's what we're talking about, and that's what her book is about. And in that book, kind of telling the journey, what are some of the things that you can tell us about without giving the book away that you feel like help to better tell the story of the relationship that heterosexual people may question or don't know about? You said you had a heterosexual friend who read the book and she was glad that she read the book. So, what are some of the things in the book that you feel like would be appealing or that would make heterosexual people want to read it?
It covers a range of topics. So, changing genders in a relationship. So, anyone who has been a part of that process or knows somebody who has, it can give them some deep insights into what that's about. Also, just being in a relationship in general, the communication. One of the main characters is a therapist in the book, and so she's communicating maybe a little more effectively than your average person, and some of the characters are not communicating very effectively, and so it's how to navigate that and how to meet your needs, talk about your needs, handle when you're not getting your needs met, and how to keep going through some really, really hard times when the world doesn't just stop for you to.
Yeah. So, what was the light bulb moment for you? You had been dating men all of your life. So, what was the light bulb moment for you that you decided, I want to date this woman?
Hmm. We're getting real personal here, Pamela. It was a conversation. It was a random conversation that I'd had with this person that I had known for about a year. And it literally, I could feel it coming on, just like,
Hmm.
the sky starts, the sun's setting and it turns pink. All of a sudden, I had feelings for this person. Like through a few sentences, I walked away from that interaction just feeling like I was floating and skipping and I was high and I was like, "What is this feeling?" And throughout that whole day, I'm processing it and I'm like, oh, I like her. I really like her. And I just couldn't wait to talk to her again and to figure out what was going to happen here.
Did she like you immediately?
It was a series of a few months of just talking and getting to know each other better. I didn't think she would be into me. I don't know why. But I was flirting. She didn't understand. She didn't get that because, she thought I was straight. So when I finally revealed that, things just quickly went off.
Well, this book that you have written and this journey of the trials and tribulations and the journey of this long distance relationship, what was happening with you personally during that time? Did you start to question whether or not you had made the right decision?
Not at all.
Okay.
No, I prepared myself that it might not end up being a long-term relationship, and I just felt like I was along for the ride. And I
Hmm.
knew that even after just a couple weeks, I was so fulfilled and I'd learned so much about myself. And I knew that this was like the beginning of this big expansion for me in my dating life. And I felt like I wanted to be okay with it no matter what, whether it continued or whether it ended and whether we, went back to being friends or whatever the case would be. I just felt so grateful to have like light bulbs go off all the time and I felt like I was alive in a different way, I guess. And I knew there was no going back from that.
Do you think that that kind of relationship could have happened without the intimacy? Like you could just connect with a woman in a way that you don't could, like your best girlfriend.
Yes. Well, I feel like, I mean, those feelings I had that were definitely not platonic, that feeling of, aliveness and really, curious about something, I think whether she reciprocated or not, if she didn't and we were friends, I still would have known I would have known I need to date a woman now. So fortunately, she felt the same way, and it was a um, great experience for a long time. But even without that, I knew, I knew I couldn't go back.
Even after the breakup, you were like, I'm still moving forward. I will find somebody else. This didn't work, but I will
Yes.
find. You didn't think I need to go back to my guy.
No. Nope.
Did anybody try to convince you to do that?
No, they did not. And if they did, I would have laughed at them. I don't do what other people tell me. So,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
but I connect
Well,
really deeply with a lot of my close female friendships because
you did what? You did what?
I do connect deeply with some of my close female friends. I have, 3 or 4 really close women friends that I feel amazing with, but I'm not attracted to them in that way, and I don't imagine a relationship with them that involves intimacy, but I can get a lot of those same wonderful feelings just from having really deep conversations, which really feed me.
Did you have heterosexual female friends that responded to you differently?
Not that I noticed. Maybe they did, but I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. Interesting conversation with Anastacia Walden, who has written a book about a woman who dated men and then found herself attracted to women and their journey, the ups and downs, the um, a society where it is becoming more acceptable. But did you have any apprehension when you had those feelings initially?
I don't think so. I was just so excited. And
Really?
at that point, I had been actively thinking about it for a few years, thinking about dating a woman, thinking about how much better that could be. But I just didn't know where to start.
Well, how much better did was it for you? What was the big difference for you?
And this is something I could have done with men, but for some reason, being with women helped me to fully be myself, to say what I want to say, to ask for what I want, to get my needs met. to dress how I want, to wear makeup or not wear makeup, or wear jeans or wear a dress, or funky style, like for some reason, cut my hair however I wanted. For some reason, I finally felt totally free to do any of those things I wanted. And I really didn't know I was doing it differently before.
Well,
But
that's really interesting that you say that because you, as a human, should have felt free to do that, right?
right, I should have. Yeah, but I didn't. And I don't really know why.
Because we are all under that.
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
think women, period, are under that umbrella. Like I had one woman say to me, a white lady, she said, "I just can't get skinny enough for it."
Mhm.
Really? And then you hear the stories of Lady Diana. When she, one story, every time that she ate a dessert, and Charles would say something to her about eating the dessert, or you know, other things
Mhm.
that we don't even realize that society has imposed on us.
Mhm.
But we have the right to be free and still be in a relationship. And it's amazing that you felt like you had to be in a relationship with a woman in order to be free, but you're still the same person.
Yeah, I didn't know I wasn't free before. It was just, all those things that we're taught as women growing up to people please and to do what's expected of us. And
Hmm.
my hair was really long for a long time. And I always knew, all the men I dated loved long hair and I had long hair. And then at some point I cut my hair shorter and I loved that. And that felt really good. And that happened before I started dating women. So that was the beginning of me just doing something different. And then, we judge our stomachs when we're sitting in a bathing suit and we lean forward and all those things, those tiny little things. And then I started dating women and when I looked at them and I saw beauty in their curves, then I saw myself differently. But I could never do that before. When I could see, and they didn't have makeup on or their hair was messy, I thought all of that was just so attractive and sexy, and because they were just so raw and real in a way that I know because I'm a woman too. And so I could put that on me and I could look at myself differently. And so that was part of the transformation that I made.
Well, I think that's an interesting book also. Just
Mm.
so you now see what that feels like. And so, how do you help women who are heterosexual to feel that same way?
Oh,
How do
plug
we remove that veil?
I plug it in constantly. And a lot of the women that I work with, they're in their 30s, 40s, and 50s. So they're old enough and the messages out there are different now. Where celebrities are showing themselves without makeup and messy hair. And so, I work with them to be their true self. And I talk to them about how that's going to attract the partner that's going to be the most compatible for them when they are themselves, when they speak their mind, when they're not people pleasing all the time, when they state their desires and all of those things.
That is so interesting. So very interesting that is the place that you found freedom
Mm-hmm.
um, in many ways in your life. You're going to be a part of the Sunshine State Book Festival. Is this your first?
It is my first book festival, yes.
How important is that for you to be able to? The Writers Alliance of Gainesville's theme is bringing readers and writers together. How important is that for you?
Well, to be in a group of a lot of other authors, being around my people, that's going to be truly exciting to me. I love talking to other writers, and to be a part of something that promotes my books will feel really good. I didn't have it was sitting there ready for 3 years before being published because I was waiting on a literary agent, which never happened. I just kept getting rejected, and finally I got a publisher and went that route. So I feel like this festival is a way to bring it to more people and to have more exposure. So that part is really exciting for me.
And so your other book about Gainesville,
Mhm.
what made you decide to write that?
This one. So
Choice.
Miles of Trees actually was done first, but it was sitting there. I just kept editing it constantly for 3 years, waiting on this phantom literary agent. And then I got notified about wanting writers for Gainesville, Florida, to write the Gainesville edition of this book, and I applied for it and got the gig, got the job, and I knew this would be published with a publisher. It was an automatic deal, and so I thought that would really help me to sell the other book and to get representation. And it was easy for me to do. I run an Airbnb, and so I was always giving tips on Gainesville. I've been here for so long, and I felt like that would be a fun, easy, quick book to do, and it was.
I feel like we need to have another show and talk about your midwife journey.
Let's
because that is too freeing for many women to be able to go that route.
mm, absolutely. And I think part of, my work with women, with clients and families for over 15 years as a midwife, that also really helped to ground me and to honor women and their choices and people doing things that weren't necessarily what everyone else was doing. And so that kind of started my radical journey, I guess, to look at other ways of being and to accept that and not put those limitations on myself, I think.
Yeah, well, Anastasia, it's been wonderful and delightful conversing with you about your book, about your journey from dating
Mm.
men to dating women. And thank you for sharing your story of freedom that I hope that other women will take from this, um, that you are free already. You
Mhm.
just have to act on it.
Yes, give yourself permission to say what you want and do what you want. There's no one holding you back but yourself.
I appreciate you.
Mm. You too, Pamela. Thanks for doing this good work.
Yes, thanks. I appreciate all of you who are watching, whether you're watching on Facebook. Thank you for the hearts and the shares. Thank you on YouTube if you're watching on YouTube. And I certainly invite you to go to our YouTube channel, which is the word at thewellnessnetwork.org, and subscribe. And if you're watching on LinkedIn, thank you. My book, The Art of Forgiveness, An Expression of Peace, is available on my website at PamelaDMarshall.com. The book is Miles of Trees. It is the story of a straight woman who starts to date women. You can meet Anastasia at the Sunshine State Book Festival. I don't know why I keep saying September. It's January.
January, yes.
January 27th and 28th
Mhm.
at Trinity United Methodist Church. I will be there, and I hope you will be too. Thank you again for joining us. I'm Pamela Marshall at the Wellness Radio TV and at the Wellness Radio TV podcast. Remember, there is healing at the well. Make it a fantastic moment. We'll